Okay, folks, we're going to make a start in a moment or two. If you could finish off your conversations and find a seat somewhere. Thanks very much, everybody. My name is Peter Osborne, and I have the pleasure every day of the week to chair the Centre for Cross-Border Cooperation. And it is a pleasure because of the variety of work that this centre does, and it's fantastic to have so many people here today for what is the Centre's 2025 annual conference. You'll notice that it's the annual conference for the first time with the brand new name and the brand new branding for the centre. It's the Centre for Cross-Border Cooperation. And we changed that last year because of what the centre does. Yes, the centre still does research. We do a lot of research to inform the issues and some solutions around cross-border cooperation, but the centre does much more than that. The centre continues to help to normalise and facilitate and deliver collaboration on a cross-border basis. That is work that identifies the mutual needs, the mutual interests and the mutual benefit of cross-border cooperation for people from all backgrounds and all beliefs either side of the border, ultimately with the aim, as we all have, to make life better for people living on this island, regardless of where they live. There's already an awful lot being done, and my goodness, some of the people in the room today are practitioners to make life better for people all over this island. But as we all know, there's still a lot more to do. And that's the point of the conference as well. So thank you so much for everybody for coming along. I keep hearing during the year how important this conference is, not just because of what we all will learn from the panels and the expertise that is assembled during the course of the day, but maybe even more importantly than that, what we will learn from the conversations that we have outside the formal sessions. And that's why the conference does have the important coffee breaks for a good length of time, the lunch breaks, and please do circulate, talk, make contacts, and deepen our knowledge and deepen the contacts that we have to deliver that work that is so important. Demand for conference today was really significant. I think there may still be people on the waiting list, and it's great to see every seat taken just about in the room. It's got a theme of all-island labour market, and that emerged from a report that was done by the Labour Employer Economic Forum, Louth, part of a shared island working group. And whenever the centre and others went out and talked to people about that report, we realised there was real interest and real demand for further conversations. And can I give a shout out to those people who wrote that report, to Maureen O'Reilly, Rose Tierney and Devlin, and of course from the centre, Anne-Marie O'Kane. And that's a good point, not just to say thanks to those folk who have stimulated such a degree of conversation about the all-island labour market, but also to thank Anne-Marie O'Kane and her colleagues and my colleagues at the Centre for Cross-Border Cooperation for all of the work in organising the conference today. The webinars, the seminars, the workshops that have been held are what have led to the conference that we're having now. Can I also say, before we get on with the conference, a brief, all too brief because of their significance, thank you to so many of our sponsors. I want to particularly highlight the Department for Further and Higher Education, Research, Innovation and Science on the southern side of the border. This conference is, I suppose, like the iceberg above the surface of the work that the Centre for Cross-Border Cooperation does. But actually, every day of the week, there is work linking people and helping to facilitate the cross-border work that everybody here also does on a daily basis. Without the support of the department, that 366 days a year work would not be possible. And can I just very formally and very gratefully thank the department for all of the support that they give to the centre, not just this year, but for many years gone by. I think the centre just wouldn't be what it is without the support from the Department for Further and Higher Education, Research, Innovation and Science. The only thing I'd ask them is, can you not make your name a bit shorter? Because blimmin' heck, it's a lot to remember. We also have sponsors for many of the workshops today, or the panel discussions today, and can I give a sincere thanks and shout out to them, to Intertrade Ireland, fantastic organisation existing for a long time, as are many of the other organisations, of course, to Ibec, to Epic Futures NI, part of UU, to the Southern Regional College, to Accounting Technicians Ireland, who I notice has Kimberly Osborne, who has no relation, just so that everybody knows. Not that that's a bad thing, and I'd be very delighted to be related, but we're not. To the Dundalk Institute of Technology as well. Again, we just wouldn't be able to put on a conference like this without sponsorship support from those organisations, and I'm sure you'll see their names more as we go through the day as well. Can I give a particular thanks also to the two main sponsors of the Centre for Cross-Border Cooperation, who set up the organisation 26 years ago because they had a vision about doing research that was of practical purpose just after the Good Friday Agreement, and they came up with the idea for the Centre for Cross-Border Cooperation, which is still going strong, and some today, and that's obviously Queen's University and Dublin City University, who you will hear more of again, and of whom many of the board members of the Centre are drawn from as well. We really appreciate that. But we also have two main sponsors of the conference today that you can see either side of me, the Dublin-Belfast Economic Corridor and the Northwest Tertiary Education Cluster. And I'm going to ask Councillor Robert Nash and Paul Hannigan from both those organisations to come up and join me on the stage, because they will say a few words in a moment or two. Councillor Robert Nash is a member of Louth County Council and the chair of Dundalk Municipal Council. Robert, can you come and join us? Paul Hannigan is Vice President of Cross-Border Engagement at ATU. Robert, Paul, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to hear a short video, or see a short video, and then we'll hear from both Robert and Paul.
100 miles, one corridor, unlimited potential. This is the Dublin-Belfast Economic Corridor.
A collaborative partnership between 8 councils and 2 universities on the island of Ireland.
A world-class destination for business. Ibec is home to over 2.2 million people and boasts a thriving ecosystem of global and local enterprises. An exceptional region to live, work, play and visit.
We are supercharging the island's Eastern Economic Corridor, fostering growth in key sectors including advanced manufacturing and engineering, advanced agriculture, ICT, life and health sciences, professional services, creative industries, tourism and renewable energy.
Ibec is perfectly positioned as a global gateway, seamlessly connecting the UK, Ireland, Europe and beyond.
Our location between GB and the EU markets is unrivaled, with excellent road and rail infrastructure, strong digital connectivity, plus access to multiple seaports and international airports.
Through collaboration, research and innovation, we're driving sustainable growth and creating the right conditions for businesses and communities to thrive.
Our pipeline of talent is unmatched, with world-class universities and colleges on our doorstep, producing pioneering research and development. Alongside a workforce skilled in high-growth industries, Ibec is the ideal place to invest, innovate and scale.
Ibec is a powerhouse of opportunity, where government, business and society meet ambition, and innovation fuels prosperity.
It's more than just a corridor, it's a commitment to our future. Be part of building something extraordinary.
So, representing the Dublin-Belfast Economic Corridor, I'm delighted to introduce start the day off, Councillor Robert Nash.
Thank you, Peter. After a late call up, I'm delighted to be here this morning. So, good morning, everybody. It's a great privilege to jointly open this year's annual conference to represent the Dublin-Belfast Economic Corridor, Ibec and Louth County Council. In partnership with the North West Tertiary Education Cluster, the Dublin-Belfast Economic Corridor is proud to be the co-leading sponsor of this year's conference. Today's focus on the all-Ireland labour market, the challenges and opportunities, is a subject closely aligned to mine, Louth County Council and Ibec's priorities. For those who don't know me, I'm Councillor Robert Nash, Cathaoirleach of Dundalk Municipal District. It's my absolute pleasure to officially welcome you to my home county, Louth, to my constituency, Dundalk, Carlingford. It's fantastic to see such a strong turnout this morning, faces from across the island and even beyond. I am proud to represent the region and committed to developing it to its full potential. Louth sits at the heart of the Dublin-Belfast Economic Corridor, and we feel that advantage every day. Our county punches above its weight in attracting direct foreign investment, yet we are always striving to do more. That's why we work closely with 7 other councils from Belfast to Dublin to develop the corridor into an internationally recognised hub for economic growth. Together we can create added value and take that extra step forward. Today's conference is timely, particularly following the publication of the All-Ireland Labour Market Study. The research highlights both the challenges and opportunity for cross-border employees and workers. One clear message from that study is that greater clarity and collaboration are needed to unlock the labour market's full potential. And this is exactly where Ibec comes in. Our priority is cementing connections, building relationship with partners that carry this region forward. Alongside policymakers and partnerships that carry, alongside policymakers, businesses and cross-border workers, we are committed to addressing such issues as taxation, pensions, social security, mobility of workers, skills and qualifications, collective bargaining and trade union coverage. Cooperation and advocacy are the heart of everything we do. The Ibec partnership consists of 8 councils: Dublin, Fergal, Meath, Louth, Newry, Morne and Down, Armagh, Banbridge, Craigavon, Lisburn and Cllr and Belfast City Councils, along with 2 universities, Dublin City University and Ulster University, who we work closely together with. Our purpose and ambition is clear: to unlock the economic potential between Dublin and Belfast, to grow through research, innovation and skills development, to advocate for enhanced infrastructure and regeneration initiatives to ensure growth benefits everyone on both sides of the border. Our vision is bold: to make this corridor one of Europe's leading economic hubs, where ideas, talent and business don't just survive, they thrive. Here in County Louth, we pride ourselves on being well connected. We have the M1 corridor, access to high-speed rail, modern ports, top-class broadband and thriving towns like Dundalk and Drogheda. But the Dublin-Belfast Economic Corridor isn't just about roads or connectivity. It's about people, creativity and communities determined to succeed. That's why today matters. It's people like you here who can drive meaningful change in policy. Across our region, our council partners work with schools, colleges, training boards and businesses to prepare the next generation. Initiatives like labour market partnerships, SkillsNet, local enterprise offices and local councils are helping entrepreneurs turn ideas into real opportunities. And we continue to push for investment, capital projects, tourism initiatives, infrastructure improvements, the foundation for sustainable growth. But let's be honest, there are challenges. Labour mobility is a big one. Every day, thousands of people cross the border for work or study. Recent figures suggest around 25,000 daily, though I suspect those numbers may be higher. That's thousands of real people navigating taxation, healthcare and social security rules that doesn't always make life easy. Hybrid and remote working bring their own challenges too. A blessing for many, yet a headache for policy and regulation. That's why today is so valuable. We have the right people in the room to ask the tough questions, share fresh ideas and push for solutions that work. So please, make the most of it. The Ibec partnership is proud to be a headline sponsor of this event, and I'm particularly pleased it's taking place here in my home county of Louth. On that note, I'm delighted to officially welcome you here to the Ballymascannon Hotel Dundalk, to the beautiful Cooley Peninsula region. Welcome to all our speakers. Your presence underscores the importance of highlighting the challenges and opportunities of all island labour mobility. On behalf of the Dublin-Belfast Economic Corridor, thank you for your important work, and we look forward to your insights. Finally, sincere thanks to the Centre for Cross-Border Cooperation. Your vision and commitment is bringing us together each year is what keeps these conversations and this progress alive. Thank you all for being here and for your commitment to cross-border collaboration. I wish you a day full of lively discussions, bold ideas, but most importantly, genuine connections. Enjoy the conference, enjoy your time here in Louth, the heart of the economic corridor, the home of the Leinster champions, and if I may say so myself, the best county on the island. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Robert. And where the Guinness is good and the crack is mighty, thank you so much for that. And just as we have two equal co-sponsors of the conference today, we're going to hear a little bit about somewhere that's equally important in terms of that linkage cross-border, which is the Northwest. So the other co-sponsor is the Northwest Tertiary Education Cluster, the Northwest, just as important as the Belfast-Dublin Economic Corridor. But we're going to hear a film and then we're going to hear from Paul. So representing the Northwest Tertiary Education Cluster, it's a fantastic name. You've got Paul, Vice President Paul Hannigan.
Morning, everybody. My name is Paul Hannigan, as the Chairman has said, and I have a connection with the Dublin-Belfast Economic Corridor because I lived here for 10 years in Dundalk. So I'm coming from the Ulster champions in Donegal as well, just to balance that up a little bit. And if Louth people are looking for bus drivers, we know how to get them to the right place in the right match. We'd sort that one out as well. I was going to launch my presidential campaign here this morning as well, but I didn't think that was... So I'm just delighted to be back here in Dundalk this morning. It's really important that we, as the Northwest Tertiary Education Cluster, is here to sponsor this conference. We have done for the last number of years, but we see the benefit of it because we want to come back every year to make sure we do that properly. And the Tertiary Education Cluster is a development that has happened back about 2018, just to give a bit of background to it. The two councils, Donegal County Council and Derry City and Strabane District Council, set up what was called the Northwest Strategic Growth Partnership. These are getting shorter, these acronyms. The Northwest Strategic Growth Partnership was set up by the two councils to establish what was called the Northwest City region of Derry and Letterkenny and Strabane. And that's a really important development for our region, because what had happened was it gave us the space to play in its educational institutions, so that you now had the Northwest City region established. The four educational, tertiary education providers within that, ourselves and ATU, Ulster University, Donegal ETB and Northwest Regional College came together in 2018 as a cluster to work for the people in our region, to develop opportunities for our people in our region, to look at ways we could work together more collaboratively, to create greater opportunities for those. So that was back in 2018, and then we ran into COVID. I mean, like everybody else, we ran into the ground a little bit at that stage. But we pushed hard to keep the cluster together, And in 2023, we relaunched the cluster as the North West Tertiary Education Cluster. And from then on, we've gone from strength to strength. We have a number of project officers working with us. We have specific projects that we're working on together. And we've managed to do a lot over a very short period of time. So the way we've come together is we've tried to look at ways we can link up the programmes that we offer in the 4 institutions. We have people moving from North West Regional College into ATU, from ATU to Ulster University. Donegal ETB is servicing all of the colleges in terms of students coming through from the second level system and also from the further education colleges as well. So there's great collaboration between the 4 institutions around the provision of education, but also what we want to do really is to do something for the people in our own region, to create new opportunities, new ways of working. And you'll see in your programme today, you have a project in there, the Northwest Step project, that's on page 3, I think, of the programme, which is a Peace Plus project that's just been funded up to €10 million to actually allow us to upskill the digital skills of the people in our region. And we'll be working very closely as the 4 of us with all the various partners in the region over the next while to make sure that happens. One other thing that's really important from our own cluster is that we work very closely with all other stakeholders within the region, and they're very well represented here this morning. But one of the bodies that we have set up is what we call a Smart Industry Board. It's chaired by Kathleen, an industry provider in Derry City, and have representatives of the industry on both sides of the border, from Donegal, from Derry, working together with the local councils, with the education providers to make sure that we're addressing the needs that they have. And that's been a very successful initiative from our perspective, and we continue to work on that. So it's really what we're trying to do here is to say to people who are not familiar with their region, and I can make comparisons because I've worked and lived in both of them, that it's a thriving region within the Northwest. It's continuing to develop over the years. It is the 4th largest population agglomeration on the island when you look at it from a cross-border basis. And what we try to do is forget that the border exists. We work together on a daily basis to try and make the border invisible. Now, I know the topic we're addressing today in this conference makes sure that that's not the case. We know all the issues that are there because of people working on a cross-border basis, the various structural issues that are there that need to be addressed. And we want to make sure that we make our useful contribution to try and eradicate those and make sure that people can move freely north and south for work and for education and for whatever else they want to do. But it's important for us to be part of this conference, to work with the Centre for Cross-Border Cooperation. I changed your name again, Peter. So. The Centre for Cross-Border Cooperation is really a great partner to work with over the years. We've been involved with a number of Peace Plus projects with them recently, and they've been very successful in terms of bringing the Centre for Cross-Border Cooperation into the Northwest region, but also allowing us to engage with them on an all-island basis as well. So I'm delighted to be here this morning. I invite you to Donegal, specifically on my behalf. As a Donegal man, I'm delighted to go back there, but I have a great affinity with this part of the region and come here regularly. And it's great to see the conference being held here in Dundalk again this morning. So thanks for the opportunity to come forward and sponsor the conference. If anybody has any queries, we have a table up here at the front with representatives from Donegal, ETB, ATU, North West Regional College and UU. Hopefully we can help to answer any questions you might have. And thanks for the opportunity to say a few words this morning, and enjoy the day. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Mr. Vice President. I'm disappointed to know you'll not be promoted to President anytime soon, having ruled yourself out of the running. 2 or 3 reminders before we make the conference start for real. Thanks again to our 2 co-sponsors. Really important that they have sponsored the event. But for those who have been involved in these activities for a long time, no surprise, because both the Dublin-Belfast Economic Corridor and the Northwest Tertiary Education Cluster are massive supporters and practical deliverers of cross-border activities that make life better for people on either side of the border. So thank you again to both organisations and for speaking. As we go through the day, there'll be 1 or 2 nice additions to the programme. We'll let you know about that as we go. Can I ask you, if you are doing social media around the conference, don't forget to include the hashtag CCBCConf, as it says at the bottom of the agenda, which will allow the centre to see what's put out in social media and then repost it as the case may be. Enjoy the day, have the conversations, let's get the conference started for real. Can I ask, therefore, to start the first panel discussion, roughly on time, the chair of that panel, to join me, Dr. Rory O'Sullivan. Rory, please come and join.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I'd like to invite the members of the panel to join me as well, and I can introduce them as we go. So, this will be the first of 3 panels looking at various aspects of the labour market, an all-island labour market. In the afternoon, we'll be looking at business support organisations. Later this morning, there will be the employee perspective, but this first panel that we'll kick off today will be looking at the employer perspective for an all-island labour market. And while there are many difficulties, there are also many successes, many things that are working. The goodwill, the level of collaboration that's going on. I had the pleasure of being here last night for dinner and was talking to people, and the level of goodwill in the room was incredible. It was really fantastic. My own particular role is I am an adjunct professor in the School of Policy and Practice in Dublin City University, specifically in the Further Education and Training Research Centre. My particular interest is in the area of local employer education collaboration for skills development. So hence I was invited to represent DCU here today, which I'm proud to do. In the area of labour market, some of the things that we're going to talk about, just like to bear in mind from a focus point of view, is that there are national dimensions to an all-island labour market, but also there's the power of the regional dimension, which obviously the Northwest has been an example, and the Dublin-Belfast economic corridor being another. So there is the national and there's the regional, but there's also the local, the people who cross the border both ways every single day, be it for study, be it for work, and so on. And in the post-COVID world, the issue of remote working has raised completely new challenges for employers in particular. The themes that will come out in the conversations in the next hour will focus primarily on the competition and the recruitment of new skills, new talent, and how do we do that. And you can see that over 3 broad headings. You can talk about the initial skills or pre-service training, people leaving school, going into college before they go into the labour market. You'll have the challenge of upskilling and reskilling current employees, and the example of skill nets was already mentioned. And then there is the issue of immediate short-term skills requirements, and that is perhaps where the work visa programs and the idea of looking at that on an all-island basis comes in. But underpinning all of this will be a tax system and a regulatory system that's enabling, that's not restricting, but is an enabler of all of this. So that just sort of sets the scene a little bit, but it is more important that you hear from our expert panellists rather than from me. So it is my pleasure to introduce our panel. So immediately to my right, your left, is Rose Tierney, who's principal of Tierney Tax Consultancy. Next, we have Paddy Hannigan, who's a senior lecturer for strategy at Atlantic Technological University. And then we have Kathleen O'Hare, who's chair of Northern Ireland Skills Council. And last but certainly not least, we have Fergal O'Brien, who's director of lobbying and influence at Ibec, the sponsors of this panel here this morning. So the structure of the hour will be that each panel member will be invited to give an opening 5 minutes. Then I will ask some specific questions, which will be focused primarily on what's going well, what are the challenges, and how do we perhaps suggest addressing those. And if we have time at the end, but only if we have time, we will perhaps have time to offer a few questions from the floor. I'm originally a school principal, so I'm a demon for keeping things to time, so there might be a school bell appearing at some stage, so don't be too surprised. Okay, so Kathleen, could I begin with you, please, and offer you your 5 minutes for your introduction.
Okay. Thank you, and thank you for the invitation to be here today. I think this is a subject that, as well as being chair of the Skills Council, is very close to my heart. I've lived beside a border all my life. I went to school in Newry. I lived in Derry for 25 years. So I'm aware that the border is slightly different in Derry than elsewhere. because 30% of my colleagues would have come from over the border. Some of them being from Derry originally, but living Letterkenny, Muff, Bridgend, Carrigans, etc. So there's a blurred line there. Back in Uri now, I'm very aware of the border and very aware because my own family, 4 of them, 2 of them work in down south. So round the dinner table in the evening, I hear the issues firsthand of working over the border, and one in England, because we forget that we are in a common travel area, and it would be lovely for us to work towards a common work area. So what's going well? I could spend forever on what's not going well, but what is going well from my point of view today and the Skills Council? Firstly, we have our counterpart now set up in the last year in the south, which is the National Skills Council, and we have formed a really good working relationship with Kevin Marshall and the rest of the council. It helps the fact when Kevin and I finish a meeting in Belfast, we normally share the train from Belfast to Newry, so we have another meeting together. And we are looking at forging closer links with a conference together on a single or a couple of issues. And one of the issues that is very pertinent to us is the fact that the Skills Council in the North have just launched their green energy action plan, and that is an issue for us all, because a lot of cross-border workers are on electricity and gas. We are also very focused, probably because of my interest and Kevin's interest as well, on AI and digital skills. That is a major issue for us all, because AI is without borders, and we need to be able to manage it, yet harness it on an all-Ireland basis. I know all of the issues from living in Uri about having people crossing the border, but if I'm on the border at 5 o'clock in the morning, you would think there'd be no issues as well, because of the amount of people who are travelling from north to south and vice versa, both into healthcare, education, construction, all of those areas. So there are places that are doing things well. And I know there are policymakers in the room today, and I suppose the most fearful thing for a policymaker would be, please, can we do all of this? I know great strides have been made in advanced manufacturing, and particularly with the joint launch between the ministers earlier this year of Skills Vista. And I would like to see that working through as an example of best practice in what could actually happen. I know there's great collaboration happening, and I see FE colleges here, and I know the work that Damien Duffy is doing. I know the work SRC and Southwest College and Northwest College are doing. All of that is happening very, very well, but needs to trickle down. What's happening in UU, what's happening in Trinity, what's happening in Queen's needs to happen in tandem, and those qualifications need to work together. So common travel area into common work area with an east-west dimension, because bear in mind now we have a fair wind, because we have a minister who appreciates north-south. That might not always be the case.
Thank you very much, Kathleen. Could I invite Paddy to give his opening remarks?
Hello. No, thank you. It's great to be here, and I know that I'm sitting in front of an audience who have a great deal of expertise in all things cross-border, and in a sense, it's our perspective we can give, and the engagements that we'll have with everybody, throughout the day and afterwards is always very beneficial in terms of what we're trying to pursue. So I'm at ATU, and I've been working there for the last 35 years. Letterkenny is my home and has been my home. My college experience earlier, my undergraduate would have been in DCU in Dublin, and after that I continued my studies, and it would have been where it was convenient then, which was Ulster University. So that cross-border element is everywhere. It's everywhere in our families, it's everywhere in how we live, and it's everywhere in our neighbours and everybody's daily experience. I suppose we were discussing today, coming down in the car, a group of us, that it was a 4-border crossing for us coming from Donegal today. So it is unique. There's a unique element about the Northwest that doesn't exist elsewhere, and there's a complementarity that exists. You know, Donegal provides amenities that are very beneficial as opposed to the 2 big urban centres that are along the border in Derry and Strabane, and they are absolutely on the border. So that influence is massive, and of course there's the critical mass that you require to run a business anywhere requires a population base, and that population base is only achieved in the Northwest on a cross-border basis. And we find that in, you know, there's a lot of talk about what percentage of employees are cross-border, and you know, there is a sizable percentage, but actually it increases as you look for more professional roles, because your catchment area has to be larger. So at the higher levels in the hospital, in the university, in the council, you start to see more and more cross-border positions, and the same would be reflected on the other side of the border. So it's one single region, and that's what's been the driver behind our Northwest Tertiary Education Cluster. And I suppose what I would be reflecting is that, you know, we have 4 in our Northwest Tertiary Education Cluster. We have 4 individual institutions, all competing as we have to do in terms of our daily business, but fantastic collaborative relationships, and very keen to be partners, and also seeing good relationships with the governmental bodies as well. And actually that's where I'm.
You're done. Yeah. Good stuff. Thanks, Paddy. Thanks very much. And Fergal, could I ask you to give your opening comments, please?
Thanks, Rory, and good morning, everyone. Ibec's been absolutely delighted to support the event today, because we think it's incredibly important. This is becoming such a significant issue. It always has been, but in the last number of years, it's becoming a much more important issue for our members in the business community. So well done to the Centre for all their work in this area. It's incredibly important. So just initial reflections, maybe, Rory. The first for me is the opportunity, right, and just how strong this opportunity is for us if we can really crack this benefit of the all-island labour market and really make it deliver on its full potential. A couple of years ago, we did a piece of work to celebrate 25th anniversary of Belfast Good Friday Agreement, and one of the things that just jumped out for us so strongly was the power of attraction driving prosperity from peace, right? And that peace dividend, and look, we all talk about it all the time, but for us, one of the most significant things was, you know, yes, we attracted corporates, but we actually attracted talent. And I think we really helped in terms of the cross-border mobility of that talent, right? So the peace dividend is really significant. But unfortunately, I think we're getting to a stage where we now have a burning platform again. We're actually going backwards, and we do see a segmentation, and I think in some parts of employment, and definitely in private sector employers, this is a much more challenging issue than probably what we see in other sectors of the economy. So I think that's become a very, very material issue. To stay with the opportunity for a little bit, the opportunity for Ireland, whether we're talking for Indigenous companies and for the island of Ireland, to either sell for growth, sell for innovation, or sell for investment, when we can pitch the full value of that all-island labour market, is incredibly strong. We do have a unique proposition in terms of a growing population and a growing labour market. So much of Europe now is facing shrinking labour markets, right? And you know, we have our skills challenges here, but we do have this demographic dividend that's going to continue to deliver for us. It's not that long ago, our all-island employment was probably about 2 million, right? I can remember that, definitely when I was an economics student, it was 2 million. We're now 4 million people, right? And growing rapidly. A number of years ago, we'd set an ambition, not a forecast, that we would see a population of 10 million people on the island of Ireland. And that is definitely going to happen. Lots of people thought that was daft, actually, right? But that is happening. Anyone, again, who would have looked at the Department of Finance demographic forecasts from the last week, there's further evidence that we are pretty rapidly hurtling towards that. It may not be 2050, but soon afterwards. And we're going to be of a labour market of 5 million. Again, just think of the pitch of that. That's going to be a labour market in terms of both quantity but quality, crucially. That's going to outperform a Sweden, a Denmark, a Finland, all of these kind of what we would see as really strong performing European economies. But we're not catching its full potential. And I suppose back to the burning platform, we are going backwards, and the two main reasons we've been going backwards over the last 5 years, one has been the hybrid nature of work. So we now have lots of members coming to us and saying they will no longer hire cross-border. And that for me is an absolute travesty, right? They will in some exceptional circumstances, but they actually have a filter for cross-border applicants. And for a large proportion of them, they're now saying no. If there's an exceptional case, if it's a skill they can't get anywhere else, they still will, but if they have an alternative, they won't. And because of complexity, tax compliance, and all the other things we'll talk about over the course of the day. So the burning platform is there. And secondly, Brexit. I think probably the key issue that we see now is just the change, obviously, in our demographics and our labour force. So we already have, in Ireland, we have 1 in 4 people at work who are not born, 1 in 5, heading towards 1 in 4. So if we can't provide all-island mobility within that evolving and changing workforce, then we're really missing a trick. So opportunity stronger than ever because the world of work is changing and what the world of work can bring for us. But we have very significant obstacles. There's been a problem for many, many decades, as we all know, but we have renewed obstacles the last 4 years that we really, really need to start to address.
Thanks, Fergal. And last but not least, Rose.
Thanks, Rory. Yeah, I'm Rose Tierney. I'm a chartered tax advisor and chartered accountant, qualified both sides of the border. And I grew up on the border between Monaghan and Fermanagh. And I moved back there 20 years ago to set up a tax practice. And people thought I was mad doing so. They said people on the border don't pay tax. But they were both right and wrong in that. One of the areas I saw from the last 20 years consistently was that the employment law cross-border really, really didn't work for businesses, small, large, didn't matter. And the reason for that is that the rules aren't designed for small businesses who actually operate on the island, or even large businesses who operate on the island. They're designed for multinationals who fly people in and out of the country. And you can't fit, a square peg into a round hole. And that has been one of the problems. Then I think it was Paddy I mentioned earlier that people sort of ignored the border or tried to ignore it from an educational perspective. And I think a lot of businesses sort of ignored the border too. But as time went on and the advent of remote working, that couldn't be ignored anymore. It sort of exacerbated the problem in that remote working really, really didn't fit into the rules when you did it on the land border. So what I've seen has worked really well over the last 20 years when I've been in this space is that the Centre for Cross-Border Cooperation and CBPES are two organisations who've really, really helped steer people in the right direction as to look at this before you jump, because a lot of the problems arise because employees take up a job across the border, or an employer employs or recruits a person from across the border to work across the border, and they didn't realise the full implications of that before they did it. And as the full implications of it are becoming more and more apparent, we're now seeing that, as Fergal said, we're seeing a drop in recruitment cross-border, which is the wrong direction, shrinking the pool. So I think what we'll be talking about later is what are the key issues that are the problems here, and what can we practically do to address them. And so that's what I'd like to focus on today anyway. Okay.
Thanks very much, Rose. Who knew that tax could be funny? So thank you very much for all your introductory remarks. It just struck me when you were talking, Fergal, about all the growth in the labour market and all the demographic stuff. A group that has been growing in terms of recognition or awareness in Ireland, and that is particularly for those of us in the education sector, students with disabilities and special needs. Yet when it comes to employment, Ireland, the Republic of Ireland has one of the highest levels of unemployment for people with disabilities in the European Economic Area. So maybe we can tease that out over the course of the day. That might be an opportunity to focus on in an all-island basis as well. So just to now get down into the meat of the question, as it were. Kathleen, could I start with you in terms of from an overall skills perspective and in terms of the direction of skills, both north and south, from your perspective? Currently, like I know we're going to identify things that are going wrong, but there are also things that are going well. So could we start perhaps by just maybe briefly identifying that which is going well? Maybe then identifying some of the challenges, and then if you want to finish with what you would propose, maybe 1, 2 or 3 things that we could do. So in the next 5 years, if we did this, this would improve X, Y, and Z. Sorry, the maths teacher comes out on me, so you're going to get acronyms as well. Right, Kathleen.
I probably took the Gatling gun approach and give it to you on the opening statement, because I'm used to doing interviews and you have 5 minutes to get your issues out. But some things that are really going well. Well, look, for a start, this PAC conference today, there is a will to make sure that things are going well. I think politically we do have a fair wind, and I can't emphasise that enough, that we do have a fair wind at the minute to actually get some really good policy changes in place, because we have 2 ministers, North and South, that are keen for things to happen. The speed at which things happen in government can frustrate us, but they need to go through due process. Also, with that in mind, we don't know after the next election what political party our next minister is going to be, and whether they think, North-South is a good idea or not. No political party has had any difficulty with taking money from the South, which is a good thing, and that is constantly said. But when we talk North-South and common travel area, we also need to look east-west, because a lot of our policy in the North is based on UK policy on immigration, etc. And I suppose we are talking less about the word immigration and more about the word movement, because a common movement policy would be something that would be a fantastic all-island initiative, particularly in areas that have skills shortages. And we could list those very greatly in rank order. But if we had policy like that, and there's some initiatives happening, particularly in health, particularly in education at the minute, but it needs to happen in other areas as well. Because it's very frustrating if somebody brings in dry liners from Poland into Drogheda to build new houses, and they can't move them to a school they're building in Crossmaglen. Or it's very frustrating if certain skills shortages are in areas like engineering, for example, and we have a big bottling factory in Derrylin. So there are real issues with skills shortages that we could solve on an all-island basis. We need to crack that hybrid working, and some companies have done that really, really well. And some hospitality areas have done that really well. If you look at, for example, the Bishopsgate Hotel in Derry and how it employs, it doesn't have an issue with bringing staff on board. If you look at, initiatives that are happening in skills, for example, in Mid-Ulster with the Mega, really, really impressive. But we need to maybe have a number of case studies, and I know Trinity and Queen's are working together at the minute. I know Atlantic College are working together. We now have a better snapshot of what the issues are, and I think you need to start with that. You need to start with identifying the problem, but then move very quickly to solutions. And that's why I mentioned the Skills Vista report, which I'm sure you've all seen, because it talks about joint apprenticeships, north-south. It talks about really good initiatives happening. We need to have more of those. You don't want to see a gas fitter in Newry having to go down to Dundalk and do work, and then his work needing to be signed off by someone in Dundalk. You don't need to see us losing endless graduates every year. We lose 6,000 graduates every year in the north to England, Scotland and Wales, and they're never going to come back. We need to make it probably more attractive for them to be here. Great to see the announcement last night about extra funding for financial technical services in Belfast on the back of Trump's visit. But I think we need to be able to grab those opportunities together.
Thank you, Kathleen. And Paddy, from the Northwest regional perspective, can you give your thoughts about what you think is going well, maybe some of the challenges, and what one or two solutions that you would propose?
So I suppose for us, what's going well is we have, as a cluster, we have senior buy-in from, the senior leaders across all 4 institutions. So we have very good engagement with that. We've built up a very good relationship. We have an identity now, the branding. We have a website that we're providing. We have information that we're getting out there. We're finding that that presence of being there and pushing these issues for a while means that you do have access then, to the right people in terms of the governmental bodies, and that's all very useful. So it's the established relationship. It's identified that there is a need. We do have what we call a smart industry board, which represents industry from both sides of the border. And I suppose initially I would have feared what the engagement would be with that group, because they have obviously quite a number of complex problems, and if they were coming along with looking for immediate solutions from us, that would be challenging. But actually it's very collaborative. They're very understanding of what we can do and how we can move together. So that collaborative element, and again, Centre for Cross-Border Cooperation are a useful partner in helping get across this message, and they were partners with us on a previous conference, and we're looking at them with them for funding for a particular project as well on skills and employment skills mobility and student mobility. So there's a lot of goodwill, there's a lot of understanding, but the labour market report did highlight the work that has to be done and the challenge that exists, and it's very complex. So if I was to look for solutions, I suppose looking closer to home, I would think that our systems are maybe more complex than they need to be. If you want to communicate what happens, I think we need to have that sort of cross-border view. So, how is this going to translate if you want to explain an education officer, an education offering to a parent on the other side of the border or a student, and how that relates to what they have. And equally, the same is true. And we have a richness which has made our job more complex, but richness in that we cross tertiary education, and that engagement with further education is very useful, because that's the entire employment skills development, and that's been very interesting. But that's also a space that's very complex on both sides of the border, right, and probably not as well understood. So, and for me, complexity is the first one you want to see resolved. I think we can make our systems less complex. The other one is the information provision. We need to have better information provision that we can understand. And the Border People Project that being done through CCBC is a fantastic resource, and very useful. And it's not that you want to replicate it. We want to direct people to there, right, but there might be more education-related elements that education providers can provide a specialism. And then the other one is, when we look to change things, we look to policy for those changes. Right. And we need those sort of drivers to help us. So it is interesting looking back at a report that was done in 2001 for the North-South Ministerial Council, and it had a number of recommendations in there about mutual recognition for both higher education skills, crossing further education, and those are still a very important agenda. The divergence that Fergal's talking about, obviously, it means that this really needs to be, we need to be pushing for this as soon as we can.
Thanks, Paddy. Fergal, can I ask you then to elaborate perhaps on like I know you mentioned things are in a difficult place perhaps in recent years, but maybe take a step back and say, well, look, these are the things that are going well, or these are the opportunities that are perhaps emerging, like the Dublin-Belfast Economic Corridor, the Northwest Tertiary Education Cluster, those kinds of structures as enablers or as maybe of what can happen. Again, maybe to identify specific challenges and to offer your maybe top 3 things that you'd like to do, have done in the next 5 years, perhaps.
Yeah, thanks. Well, look, I think it's really important that so much of the analysis and diagnosis has happened. So I think the report that the Centre has delivered, and I know you'll hear from Owen later in the afternoon or in the day in terms of the employee and the trade union perspective. But the genesis of this was employers and trade unions coming together through Labour Employer Economic Forum, and with the support of Shared Island Unit and Parliament Taoiseach, to say that we have a real serious challenge here. So I think it was superb to see that support for the challenges that we're all raising, to grow the awareness, and then for the diagnosis that's happened. So the answers are actually there, right? So I suppose for me, if I was to catch the kind of overarching one that will probably ultimately be most impactful, it will be recognising the unique set of circumstances that we have on this island, recognising the unique agreement that we have in terms of Belfast Good Friday, and how we can take that down to practical implementation through all-island collaboration, north-south collaboration, to address those obstacles. Because neither government can do it on their own, right? And we will need that recognition internationally, because this goes outside UK policy issues. There would be international issues here in terms of OECD initiatives and taxation of workers and taxation of businesses as a result of where workers reside. So there are international complexities. But for me, the core framework is actually our agreement, and putting that agreement to work to solve this problem, building on the diagnosis that we have, and all of the specifics of that. And I suppose then, Rory, the other thing I'd mention at this stage is the opportunity of change, right? Because we kind of spoke a little bit about some of it, right, in terms of hybrid ways of working, right? That's not going to change, right? But the opportunity that brings us, and I know it's a particular issue for the border, right? But the more ways of working change, then it goes far beyond the border issue in terms of the catchment, in terms of our potential labour pool. I always say to people in Dublin, I'm no border credentials, I'm a Limerick man, right? But I always say to people in Dublin, Belfast is our closest city. I look at the channels and the corridors of all our other cities, and Belfast is our closest city, right? But with ways of working, that labour catchment goes way beyond even just Belfast, Dublin-Belfast Economic Corridor, and right across the entire country. So the opportunity's never been stronger. So I know we see the challenges of the hybrid, but the opportunity is spectacular. Again, I go back to kind of pitching the potential labour supply. And I suppose that's again the piece that companies are saying to me, particularly if you are closer to that border, they can no longer pitch the full 60-minute commuter catchment in terms of potential labour supply, if they've got a wall on one side of that. And in their view right now, unfortunately, that's what they see. So it's reducing their capacity to grow, it's reducing their capacity to pitch for new investment. But the other element in terms of the future, the evolving nature of our workforce, and again, I suppose spoke a little bit about the changing demographics and the impact that immigration is going to continue to have, right, as our labour market becomes more diverse and our workforce becomes more diverse. We need to have an all-island market that's going to function to recognise that not everyone in that labour market is a citizen of Ireland or Northern Ireland. We have to absolutely recognise that. And then the other element I really want to come to is just the changing nature of work in terms of technology and the requirements that we're going to have in terms of lifelong learning and upskilling. And again, the number of companies that are structured on an all-island basis, and they're trying to tap into this multitude of different initiatives north and south of the border to try and address their upskilling challenges. Because what we're seeing in the business community in terms of the pace of rollout of AI and the scale upskilling and reskilling that employers are going to have to do in the next 5 years. I don't think we've ever seen a phase like it, but the companies are really grappling with that on an all-island basis, and these are things we really need to crack jointly. So it's going to be, how we do things like our skill nets initiatives, other initiatives that we can tap into in terms of the educational institutions working jointly to provide all-island solutions. But we're going to a challenging phase for our labour market, for our workforce. They're going to need so much support in terms of upskilling, and we need to be able to do that on an all-island basis.
Fergal, thank you very much. And Rose, in many cases, I suppose the taxation system can incentivise or it can disincentivise, if that's even a word, in terms of particular features of the labour market and the world of work. Like I know in the Republic, there's an ongoing debate about the use of the funds in the National Training Fund, for example. So that comes from an employer levy, and the money is there, and it's the redistribution of that. So it's not just what is taxed and what is not taxed, but what do you do with the money that's collected? So all of that could have an enabling dimension to everything that people are trying to talk about here today. So you have a unique expertise of being qualified on both sides of the border in the tax field. So no pressure, but can you give us your perspective of, again, the things that you think are going well, maybe some of the particular challenges that you're facing in your work, your daily work, and maybe some, your top three. These are the things we could do within the next 5 years, and that would open a lot of gates.
From what's going well point of view, the fact that we were asked by Louth to put together a report last year in relation to labour mobility on the island of Ireland, and people actually stood up and listened after that report. That's what's going really well at the moment, because so many people have come in behind us now and said, we sort of now understand what the real issues are. So the likes of Intertrade Ireland, the likes of Chartered Accountants Ireland, Ibec, all of those people have said, yeah, we'll support you to try and get to the next stage, to the solutions part of this. So what's going really well is that the information is getting out there, but it has the knock-on effect that Fergal's been talking about, and that employers are pulling back from recruiting cross-border. So it's the dark side and the light side there. And the reason for that is that the fact there's more information available, they realise the risks of doing this. Traditionally, it would have been smaller businesses along the border that have said sometimes they wanted to sleep at night, and then they realised that we can't sleep at night because we can't actually fit ourselves into this legislation. But as remote working became more popular, and particularly since COVID, it has just spread across the entire island, I should say. The amount of large employers now and medium-sized employers who are recruiting people who are now working from home, is almost a demand from employees that they do get to work from home, at least part-time. And they're realising then the risks of that. But the amount of cases I've seen come across my desk from employees of organisations over the last few years is that the information may be there, but a lot of them are not acting on it. And because of that, then we have what's called a legacy issue here. And people say, well, I don't want to put my hands up as an employer because I might have legacy tax issues here. I've paid my taxes, employment taxes, on one side of the border, but maybe I should have been paying a bit both sides or on the other side of the border. And when you've got worries like that, then they don't really want to sort of, wave a flag about it. But the thing that people should remember is that if you actually read the detail in the Louth report, is that these legacy issues aren't just confined to private sector. It's also public sector. Would you believe that government employees who are traditionally under Article 18, as soon as they start working from home, they're kicked out of Article 18, which means they're not just taxed in country of payment. The employer should have been looking at the other side of the border too. And the amount of local authority employees, education establishment employees, civil servants, quasi-government bodies, all those people, some of them very high-level salaries, that have come to me in terms of tax advice over the last few years and realised, oh God, we're in a trap here. We didn't realise this. We didn't realise what responsibilities. What should our employer have been doing? And the lack of information within those organisations, they've got legacy issues too. So the issues that are the key issues that haven't been working are that as soon as you send somebody to work in their home jurisdiction across the border, there's an instance of potential dual payroll. And dual payroll by its nature is very, very complex, very costly to implement, and very hard to manage. And so employers back away from it. They said, this is just too complex. The knock-on effect of dual payroll is that there's not only the whole complexity of the payroll part of it, but you've got potential permanent establishment issues for the employer as well, which is creating a tax presence in the other jurisdiction where they didn't want to have a tax presence just because of the employee working from home. Now, this is not unique to this island. We've loads of other countries around Europe that have plenty of borders, and they've all sort of dealt with these issues on a bilateral basis. And there's no reason why this jurisdiction couldn't deal with it on a bilateral basis too. The EU said that some time back, and that, you know, that this can be dealt with on a bilateral basis. You don't have to wait for the EU to say what to do, or for the OECD to say what to do. Now, the OECD at the moment, this year in 2025, are actually looking at the issue of permanent establishment created by an employee working in the other jurisdiction, and they're trying to sort of find ways to minimise that risk. And so we're waiting for sort of some feedback from what's going on in terms of those discussions. But in relation to the dual payroll problem, there's ways that we can use what's there already, not touch the international rules at all, leave those for the multinationals or flying people in and out. They work perfectly for those, but we can take some of the learnings from that and actually create our own set of rules. First, by recognising frontier workers and employers in legislation. Because if you don't recognise them, how can you actually design legislation around them? You've got to define them in the first place. So if you've got a frontier worker or employer, that's an employer on one side of the border who's recruiting an employee who lives on the other side of the border. Once you recognise that, then you can sort of put a set of rules together that are sort of similar to, but not exactly the same as, the international rules. What you do is you line it up with the social security rules. So from social security perspective, somebody can work 40% of their duties in the Republic of Ireland without actually changing system, competent authority. They don't have to shift from NIC to PRSI or vice versa. It's 25% the rule in the north. But if you lined it up with the 40%, you know, you're looking at maybe hybrid working could be introduced here over the next few years. That could be hybrid working for all, you know, cross-border workers as well as everybody else. And that would simplify it. If you line it up with the social security rules in terms of number of days that you can work, you're not shifting anybody from either a social security perspective or from a tax perspective to the other side of the border. You're eliminating dual payroll for those people. You're decreasing the complexity for the employer. And you're also potentially minimising that permanent establishment exposure that they thought they were subject to, especially when we see what comes out of the OECD in this regard as well. The other big issue there's been, and I think it wasn't that well highlighted before we did the Leaf report last year, I wrote the tax and pension piece of that with some help from some pension advisors that are familiar with this stuff. And what really came out to the fore was that so many advisors along the border weren't able to advise in the dual aspect. And so when they talked about, you know, people not paying tax along the border sometimes, it's a bit like the weather forecast on the telly. You know, the 6 counties are greyed out. You know, the weather doesn't cross the border, so why should the tax? And a lot of advisors just were saying, well, we'll stick to our own rules, assume it's the same on the other side of the border, which is totally wrong, of course. So what was happening is they were getting bad advice, and they weren't necessarily, you know, following what they should have been doing or realising the risks of what they were doing. So one of the things that really wasn't highlighted was the whole pension issue, and that a cross-border worker doesn't get tax relief on their pension contributions if they work for an employer on the other side of the border and they make their pension contributions on the other side of the border. That's a huge issue for people who, say, are on high-level salaries, who are making big pension contributions. You think about the brain drain as they're talking about from the north, all the people hopping on the Belfast train to Dublin, all those new doctor contracts over the last number of years, all these high-level civil servants and quasi-government bodies who are now recruiting people from across the border. A lot of those thought they were going to be able to bump up their pensions and get pension tax relief. Yes, they'll get it south of the border, but when they go to file that on a self-assessment basis north of the border, they don't get that relief. So basically, they're getting relief on one side and they're handing it to HMRC on the other. And vice versa, it's the other way around as well, as you go in the opposite direction. There's no tax relief on those pension contributions if you're a cross-border worker. The only way you can get tax relief for pension contributions as a cross-border worker is that you change residency across the border, you've moved home, and you continue to pay the scheme you're already paying to. That's not the usual situation. Or you are posted by your employer to work across the border, and you continue to contribute to the pension scheme. Usually people just take up a new job. The majority of people who cross the border take up a new job. They're not being posted by the employer. So that was a huge issue. And then there's the other issue of, well, what happens to your pension when you draw it down? Now, the rules in the south are straightforward, whether it's a northern pension or a southern pension, but the rules in the north are not so straightforward. So So you can end up getting taxed on part of your tax-free lump sum as it would have been in the north. So is it a real worry from a pensions perspective for people working cross-border in that pension investment may not have been a good investment. In fact, it could have been a very bad investment and might not find that out until it's too late. So that's a big issue as well. Now, what can we do about that from a practical point of view? Well, we can actually change the legislation quite easily to give the tax relief in both jurisdictions. That's not a big ask. It's quite easily done to do that, to actually introduce that piece of legislation that you can give the tax relief on the pension contributions in your home jurisdiction. Recognise that foreign pension. And the same from the UK perspective as well in terms of the pension lump sums. The real crux of the matter there is recognising that pension pot or that pension provision on the other side of the border is equivalent to a UK pension, so why should it be treated any differently? So that can be done as well through primary legislation. And of course, all of this stuff needs willingness from both parties. Now, what we've really been uplifted by is the number of organisations that have come in behind us on this. But at this point, it's moving it on. Employers are so frustrated at this point that we need to move it on fairly quickly to be the enabler for all this good stuff that's been talked about here this morning. Because unless we do that, we're going backwards. And we've done so much work in this area now. It's a case of engaging with those departments if they're willing to listen to us and to move that stuff on and come up with these solutions that we're talking about and actually put them into primary legislation or into a bilateral arrangement.
Well, Rose, you have my undivided attention as a pensioner for the last few minutes, anyway, I can tell you. And I'm way too close to the border for my level of comfort. So that was fabulous, and thank you very much. And thank you to all our panel for all the contributions. Just to give it some of, I was trying to scribble some of the ones. To crack hybrid working. I think that is not just from the skills point of view, but the tax and the legislative point of view, and all of those various things, and the pension point of view as well. Joint apprenticeships, I think, I think that's an idea that has been around for a while. It just has to be enacted. We just have to get on and do. And the old chestnut of the mutual recognition of not just qualifications, but capacity to perform the work in another jurisdiction. The example of the electrician being the case. Paddy, you were talking about systems being too complicated. There's a netter for better information provision and that it makes it easier to communicate, and the importance of taking a cross-border view, particularly in those key regional areas such as the Northwest. Fergal, you were talking about the idea of the all-island labour market, the all-island economy, having common work visas, work regulations, the tax situation, the importance of reskilling and upskilling, and then Rose, the enabler of tax and the pension regulations, and how with modest, I would think would be fair to say, legislative change, that matter could be resolved to everybody's benefit, because at the moment it's seems to be holding everybody back. So I know there are officials from DeFerris, Department of Taoiseach, Department of Enterprise, Trade and Employment, and the Department of Finance in the room, and there's also the Department of Economy in the north in the room, so please take note. You will be caught at the 11 o'clock coffee break and wanting to know what you're going to do about what's just being suggested. So we have about 15 minutes left. So does anyone on the panel want to make a further contribution, or will I invite? Yes, so we would like to invite people in the audience for some questions. So what I propose to do is we've just under 15 minutes, so if I take about 3 questions, give them to the panel and see where it goes from there. Is that okay? We have a gentleman just down here with his hand up and a lady just here being number 2, and if there's a third person as well. So if you could keep it, say who you are, where you're representing, and the question short and sweet.
Thank you. Dr. Conor Keelan, I'm an economist with Oak Lodge Consultancy. Might I just briefly come in to support Rose's comment, which I think has just shocked many in the room. Might I add that for 34 years, my father was a cross-border worker, working in Uri, also in Armagh, and residing in Dundalk. while also he was a public representative, okay? So at the time, you can imagine, this was before the Good Friday Agreement and during the peace process, when at the time, as Rose would know herself, there was tax on the double.
Yes.
Okay, which ended, as it happens, in one budget when Charlie McCreevy, the then finance minister, said, stop paying, because of the European Union only paying one jurisdiction. Now, during the talks on Brexit, when I was a former public representative, I actually did say at a council meeting, because my father was a former cross-border worker, and knowing there were a lot of cross-border workers there in the council as well, in other places, I said, have we factored in the cross-border workers coming across the border with Brexit? But I was not just thinking about the transport issues, which I saw myself across Europe with other borders. I was also thinking about the follow-on payroll issues with pensions, etc. Now, I just want to point out, as a former public representative, your other panel factored in earlier on about reciprocation. In general, my experience is that a lot of laws in this country follow from the English model to here and tend to get replicated in this country. Also, some of them migrate, in fact, from America over to England and then to here. Now, in my view, we should be germinating a lot of our own ideas first and then replicating them here. This is why a benefit like this, where we have a panel, a lot of whom in business, we're actually offering real-world experiences of how we could develop an all-Ireland economy. Now, we must admit that there are people who would not want to see us develop, particularly, dare I say, some across the water. So therefore, if we take a lot of ideas in this from, say, across the pond, they may be hostile to the whole idea of possibly developing an all-Ireland economy. So therefore, we might think of reevaluate our perspective on how a lot of laws and policies in this country are actually germinated.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And the lady down here.
Hi, thanks. I'm Rory Winter from the US Consulate. Just very interested to learn about this topic, and my question is actually kind of diametrically opposed to that, because I was going to ask, which of the European countries or other jurisdictions have you seen that would be a good model to replicate? Because from my experience, I've seen that if you can show that this is the Benelux plan or whatever it is, and then give those to the two capitals, and sometimes that helps along with trying to get legislation through. So I was just curious if there's an actual model to replicate. Thanks.
Okay. Any other questions at this point? And this lady here, and we'll make this one the last one before I put the questions to the panel.
Hi there, I'm Margaret McNamee from the Southern Regional College, and I'm going to strengthen Kathleen O'Hare's argument with regard to all-island apprenticeships and give you an example of a question that I got from an employer. It was a US fintech company who rang me to access our fintech applicants who are from Northern Ireland, and I always seek a Northern Ireland-based company. This US fintech worked in Kilkenny, worked in Drogheda, and worked in Dublin. And then she said, yeah, how do I access your apprentices? And I said, well, do you have a base in Northern Ireland? And she just couldn't understand. Oh, and I forgot to say, her HR department was in Gdansk in Poland.
Okay.
Right? So you kind of had to explain, no, Newry isn't the European Union. And we have applicants sitting in Northern Ireland that would literally take your arm off for a job to work for a company like that, and we can't offer them.
Okay. So I'll offer it to the panel. Does anyone want to take a crack at any of that?
Well, just maybe, I suppose, one, I think, overarching remark that maybe touches on all three questions. I go back to my point on the unique nature of the island and the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. I think that has to be our framework. And ultimately, it has to be, while there are examples, and Rose, you may talk to them in terms of, cross-border worker solutions elsewhere in Europe, this is a unique island. And I think it will ultimately need a unique set of solutions worked out between the two governments with international support, if that's needed from the EU or from the OECD level, because the importance that we place on Belfast Good Friday Agreement to make sure that it is supporting all of the things that we want to support here and the all-island economy. So that, for me, is the framework. And I think that touches across all three of the questions. But again, we're missing out on so much opportunity, not having apprenticeships, not having those joint upskilling initiatives. Like the workforce management implications for employers who want to structure on an all-island basis, but yet hit all of those blockages when they go to engage with a training system or an upskilling system. We're making life really, really difficult. But they want to structure a team and have the workforce flexibility across their all-island operations. And right now we're putting up too many barriers. But our solution is back to the framework, Belfast Good Friday Agreement, in my view.
I think that there is tremendous opportunities, particularly when educational institutions are working together, to have this. And I know one of the things behind Peace Plus is to have a joint education forum that would work on qualifications. And I think there is a lot of our qualifications are tied to a UK framework, but I know the Federation of Awarding Bodies are hoping to start operating in the South and to try and get mutual recognition of qualifications. I think this is a time for us to move forward before we culturally start to move separately. And I'm not sure, I've been living long enough to know that when I go to Dublin now, it feels like a very different city than it did 30, 40 years ago. When I go to Belfast, it's a very different place. I think we have the time now in the next 2 decades to do that. We had the Good Friday Agreement with a big north-south dimension. I don't think we've ever exploited that. We left that in the political forum to exploit. This body can do that, but I think we need to make more of that and to move forward with those qualifications which are north-south, and the other side is micro-credentials as well. And I know the Open University are very much looking at that, and as an all-Ireland university, it is well placed to do that.
Okay, thanks, Kathleen. I'm going to ask Paddy and Rose to keep their. I've 5 minutes left. Okay.
Yeah, no, I like the angle from the Gdansk, the HR, because that puts it in context. You know, there is a logic in applying a sort of an abstract sense to the border. I was involved in a conversation earlier in the week, and I kind of overestimated the size of Northern Ireland, and I was thinking, when you're looking at it from a Donegal perspective, I was thinking it was a third of the country, but it may be half of that. But it looms so largely for us, and I think that abstract sense is useful. What I should have said in terms of, and was lined up to say in terms of the positive, was we are looking at resolutions. We've been very lucky, many of us, to receive quite substantial funding through Peace Plus, and we're looking at resolving a number of these initiatives, solving problems to do with skills, problems with innovation, problems with research, you know, and there's quite a number of partners across the 6 border counties in the Republic and Northern Ireland who are involved in that. But I think the abstract is a good place to start when we start to look at our problems.
Paddy, thank you very much. And Rose.
Yeah, from the other examples from the European context, a lot of those are actually now fairly out of date, for the simple reason is that we now have an EU and non-EU aspect to this island. And also with the advent of remote working, it's much wider spread than just border counties near a border, and a lot of those were zone-based. This issue is a whole island issue because we have people in Kerry working for business in Belfast and vice versa, the other way around. There's a whole island issue that needs to be dealt with here. And I think at this point, it's no longer an ask from the government departments, from the employers, it's a demand. We need to do this now. We can't go on any longer. We're seeing it's actually diminishing the pool of talent available. We have to get the tax and pension piece sorted now.
Rose, thank you very much. And I don't have to take out the school bell. We're within time, and I think we'll finish 2 minutes early, so we won't interrupt people's coffee and allow you to have some convivial chat and all that. Could I ask you to show your appreciation for our panel for their time and their expertise?